Idag är jag faktiskt lite extra nervös och rörd. Till skillnad från er så känner inte jag Johan personligen, men precis som Eva så är det en stor ära att få på något sätt bidra till att uppmärksamma hans fall och på alla sätt möjliggöra att han snart ska komma hem välbehållen. Så om jag darrar på rösten så vet ni att det är ingenting jag på något sätt kan kontrollera. Det här samtalet handlar ju om människor som orättfärdigt fängslas, vad som drabbar dem i form av hot, våld, terror många gånger. Men också om anhöriga och den skräck, den vånda, den osäkerhet som man upplever. Och kanske också känsla av maktlöshet, att inte kunna göra det man vill. Johan är ju som ni vet inte den enda svensk som sitter orättfärdigt fängslad i Iran. Där sitter också den svenska iranske läkaren Ahmadreza Jalali sedan hela 8 år. Men idag har vi lite extra fokus på Johan. Han har suttit fängslad i 710 dagar. Många har engagerat sig för hans sak och det är säkert många av er som är här idag. Hur mår han? Vad gör han? Vad ska hända framåt? När kommer han att bli fri? Och det är såklart att det är allra mest plågsamt för Johans familj. Hans mamma Kerstin och pappa Mats som är här idag. Och också hans systrar som kommer att prata med mig här på scenen. Jag vill att ni ska ge dem en varm och innerlig applåd till Tove och Ingrid. Kom upp.
Hej. Vad vill du?
Det finns mycket värme i det här rummet, och, eller hur man känner det hela vägen upp på scenen.
Ja, det har varit otroligt att träffa redan vänner och bekanta och människor från förut i foajén. Det är fantastiskt.
Vi kommer att prata om er upplevelse förstås. Därför att när det här händer, vad det än händer i världen, så finns det anhöriga som också blir meddrabbade kan man säga. Och jag tänkte börja i lite grann, kanske först övergripande, 710 dagar, det är liksom en tidsperiod som inte går att ta in. Tove, hur skulle du beskriva hur den här tiden varit för er som familj?
Det är ju svårt att beskriva och sammanfatta för att det är ju så lång tid nu. Jag har små barn, det är ju liksom en livstid för ett litet barn. Men det har ju verkligen gått från i början var det ju ett tillstånd av chock och desorientering, och sen så har det ju blivit en typ av vardag att vi lever med det här sedan 2 år tillbaka ungefär, och det har ju verkligen det är ju som en toppar och dalar, men det är ju en väldigt, väldigt stor utmaning för familjen. Men att ha en sån här kväll som ikväll när vi får uppmärksamma det på ett väldigt positivt sätt känns ju otroligt stärkande.
Om vi börjar då lite från början, när ni förstod att han är gripen av säkerhetstjänsten i Iran, vad for för tankar genom huvudet då, Ingrid?
Det var ju som Tove sa otroligt förvirrat och chockartat. Vi förstod nog inte alls då att det här skulle pågå så här länge. Vi hade kanske någon tanke om att ja, det här kanske löser sig hyfsat snart. Det kanske är någon form av missförstånd. Så att det var nog vad man beskriver som någon sorts chockreaktion med. Och just den här väldigt stora ovissheten. Det tog ju ett tag innan överhuvudtaget någon fick kontakt med Johan.
Hur lång tid tog det?
Det tog ju 3-4 dagar innan vi bekräftade att han överhuvudtaget levde och var tagen av iranska myndigheter. Sen tror jag det tog kanske 3 månader ungefär innan jag tror någon från UD fick träffa honom.
Och hur lång tid tog det innan ni fick den första direkta kontakten med honom?
Det var ju nästan 1 år efter att han blev tagen som han kunde ringa till oss första gången.
1 år är ju en overklig period att inte kunna få prata med sin bror. Hur var den här absurt långa perioden?
Ja, men jag vet en grej var som jag tänkte på var att det känns, för vi är också väldigt tajta som syskon och brukar ju höras dagligen i princip liksom. Och det man ville och nästan höll på att göra var att dra iväg ett sms till Johan bara, det här konstiga har hänt, vad ska vi göra? För det är också på något vis, han är ju den av oss som är mest insatt i det här och som är kunnig i den här regionen och den här typen av situationer. Det är ju inte vi andra. Så det var också sådär att man liksom nästan ville prata med Johan om det och sen bara, nej, det kan vi inte.
Och det var ju också som att det var svårt att förstå att det är fortfarande nästan svårt att förstå att det har hänt att vi sitter i den här situationen allihop. Men just innan man fick höra hans röst så var det att han ens fanns. För mig var det som att han försvann. Att han fanns och sen försvann han.
Första gången, det är helt okej. För dig är det okej, inte för er. Och första gången som han fick en kontakt då med ambassaden i Teheran, vad kunde förmedlas då? Hur mycket fick ni reda på om honom, hur han hade det?
Jag minns ärligt talat inte just vad som sades första gången. Det var väl mest att det var en sån stor sak att någon liksom på vår sida hade fått träffa honom. Jag menar att de sa att han ens levde, att han fanns där. Det var väl det som var den stora saken. Och han har ju haft väldigt olika utmaningar eller svåra omständigheter under tiden han har varit där. I början satt han ju isolerad, alltså helt isolerad, avskuren från all mänsklig kontakt egentligen under, vi tror att det är ungefär 10 månader. Och hur han ens har klarat det är svårt att förstå. Och det tänker vi kanske kommer få höra en del mer av de som berättar senare. Och sen så senaste året har han ju suttit i en cell tillsammans med några andra medfångar. Så att det har ju varit väldigt olika omständigheter han har suttit i.
Och hur ofta ungefär har ni kunnat ha direkt kontakt med honom?
Från den här väldigt långa tiden när det var 0 kontakt tills att han ringde, vilket var så här väldigt chockartat, så började det ändå trilla in lite samtal. Kanske någon gång i månaden, var 3:e vecka, lite sådär. Det har inte varit regelbundet. Och det har också varit det här att han kanske då blivit utlovad att få ringa men inte har fått göra det och då har behövt använda sig av hungerstrejk för att till sist då tvinga sig till att få ringa familjen.
Han hungerstrejkar för att få höra av sig till er?
Ja, det har han ju gjort. Och det funkade ju ändå tills nu sista gången var det på julafton tror jag tog sist han hade hungerstrejkat i 72 timmar. Johan som brukar äta sig 5 gånger om dagen, han är den hungrigaste jag vet. Men det hade han gjort och då fick han ringa på julafton detta år, väldigt fint. Men sen hade de ju då sagt då från Irans sida att nu får han inte hungerstrejka mer för om han gör det så kommer han aldrig någonsin få ringa oss mer. Så då sa han att då gör han ju inte det. Jag tror att kanske någon av killarna sen, Olivier, kanske kan berätta lite om det här, just hur man kan använda det. Att man har ju ingen makt egentligen, men att det kanske är det enda du känner att du har någon sorts makt över din situation. Att använda hungerstrejk på det sättet.
I de här samtalen som ni ändå har haft, vad har ni kunnat fråga honom om? Har ni kunnat ställa vilka frågor som helst? Har det funnits några begränsningar? Har ni fått råd? Fråga inte om det här. Eller hur har det här gått till?
Det är ju på engelska varje gång han ringer och när han ringer så kommer det liksom ett samtal från ett okänt nummer från något utländskt nummer så det blir alltid lite som en chock även om vi går och väntar på att han ska ringa så är det alltid lite chockartat men nu har vi ändå utarbetat ett batteri med frågor. Vi frågar alltid om han har mat, om han är frisk, om det är något speciellt han behöver, om han har pengar på sitt telefonkort. Så det känns som de där grundläggande sakerna som vi vill att det ska vara i ordning. Men vi vet, det är ju på engelska, vi vet ju att alla samtal är övervakade så att det är klart att vi tänker på vad vi säger och vi utgår ifrån att han är väldigt ändå begränsad i vad han kan säga.
Och jag tänkte just för hur mycket som ni känner er bror, hur ärlig kan han vara? Vad hör ni och vad är det ni inte hör?
Det är också lite svårt ju för att dels är inte jag superbra på engelska ärligt talat och sen också det att vi inte faktiskt vet riktigt vad Johan egentligen fullt ut känner att han vill eller kan säga. Men jag tycker ändå att man kan så här, ana vissa grejer så verkligen det här är verkligen Johan liksom. Jag vet också det här att som ni alla vet här att det var ju länge någon sorts tyst diplomati som pågick och vi i familjen valde då att inte gå ut med Johans namn och så vi satt i tystnad kring detta länge. Men sen till sist vid samtalen om det var i somras då så började Johan också säga det explicit att han ville att jag vill att ni går ut med mitt namn. Och då vet jag att fastän han gjorde det så hade vi inom familjen lite olika åsikter och även vill Johan detta eller är det kanske Iran som vill. Men då vet jag att när han ringde mig första gången när jag satt på jobbet och då i princip det första jag sa var verkligen så hur är det nu med det här? Vi vet inte riktigt, vill du att vi ska gå ut med ditt namn eller inte? Och då verkligen var det som att han suckade. Han bara, men herregud, jag har ju sagt det hur många gånger som helst. Snälla, jag vill ju det. Och då kände jag till exempel, jajamän, det är min bror som talar, det är genuint hans vilja, till exempel.
Jag tycker ibland att man kan ändå känna igen honom, att vi kan skämta, att vi kan ha någon typ av interna skämt och sådär. Och det är ju fantastiskt att det går att göra, för det ger sånt hopp om att han fortfarande liksom är sig själv och att han kommer kunna komma tillbaka som delvis sig själv men förändrad.
Vi ska strax prata vidare, men apropå besök så har Johan fått ta emot väldigt få oregelbundet. Men den 11 mars för lite drygt 2 veckor sedan, då fick han ta emot ett besök och han fick också skicka med en skriftlig hälsning på engelska, för som sagt det är det enda som tillåts. Och han ville då också att en nära vän skulle läsa upp det här. Och det ska hon göra, hon har också översatt brevet. Välkommen Isabella Tjäder.
Årsfångenskap har lärt mig mycket. Till exempel att en svår upplevelse inte nödvändigtvis behöver vara en dålig upplevelse, så länge den gör oss starkare. Glädje kan hittas var som helst och när som helst, om vi bara vet hur vi ska leta efter den. Vi kan inte välja vad som drabbar oss, men vi väljer varför vi drabbas. Och jag börjar förstå vem jag är. Jag tror inte att någonting skrämmer mig längre. Jag har lärt mig leva med mindre. Och även om jag inte har mycket rörelseutrymme här, så har jag hittat oändligt med utrymme att växa. Det må vara sant att jag inte har kunnat färdas några längre sträckor den senaste tiden, men jag har gett mig ut på en oerhörd inre resa. Och visst, de flesta skulle hävda att jag är långt ifrån fri. Och ändå känner jag att mitt medvetande, mitt hjärta och min själ är friare än någonsin. Jag längtar efter att vara hemma i Bohuslän. Längtar till havsäventyr med pappa och skogsvandringar med mamma. Jag vill ramla hela gatan fram med min syster i Göteborg. Svepas med i hennes aktiviteter och passioner. Jag är glad att hon fortfarande ändrar dem lika ofta som den iranska åklagaren ändrar anklagelserna mot mig här. Men helst av allt, just den här tiden på året, så vill jag spänna på mig ett par pjäxor och skida fram genom vårvintern hos min syster i Norrbotten. Flankerad av mina små systerdöttrar och deras inte så små hundar. Till mina underbara vänner. Istället för att misströsta har ni organiserat er. Styrkan och trösten i er, min familj, är bortom ord. Ni fyller min värld med ljus och hopp. Och till dig som läser eller hör det här meddelandet, låt det som har hänt mig vara en påminnelse om oförutsägbarheten och sånt vi tar för givet. Om jag kan be dig om en enda sak, så är det detta. Nästa gång du ser dina älskade, håll om dem lite hårdare och lite längre än vanligt. Och låt dem veta hur mycket de betyder. Vi har alla våra öknar att korsa och murar att klättra över. Förr eller senare kommer en sorgens dag till oss alla. Men var så säker, jag tänker korsa den här öknen, klättra över de här murarna. Dagen kommer då min familjs sorg ska förbytas i lycka. Jag ser fram emot att fira den med er alla. Johan Floderus, 11 mars 2024.
Tack Isabella. Hur är det att höra Johans ord så här?
Men det är fantastiskt att få känna hans närvaro här och att han faktiskt får vara en del av den här kvällen och ta plats med sina egna ord. Det tycker jag är helt fantastiskt.
Hör ni Johan i det här brevet?
Absolut.
Absolut. Vi hade ju fått det tidigare, så vi har ju, med första gången jag läste detta så började jag ju gråta jättemycket. Liksom. Nu har jag ju hört det några gånger, men det är, jag tycker det är jättefint och hur han kan formulera, fastän han sitter där han gör, att han ändå känner någon sorts styrka i det och ändå beskriver att han känner sig fri. Och jag tycker det känns ju också väldigt hoppingivande inför framtiden, att han är inte nedbruten och att han har på något vis kunnat hitta ett sätt att hantera detta. Så det, ja, jag tycker det är väldigt stärkande.
Och när det är så uppenbart att han kämpar så mycket för att ta en dag i taget och leva i nuet och så där, så känns det också som att det stärker oss att försöka leva på samma sätt.
Ni ger också ett så otroligt starkt intryck. Är det något ni har byggt upp? Och jag vet att ni har pratat mycket om det här, men känns det som att jag är närmare tårar just nu än vad ni är?
Ja, då har du inte sett mig när jag la mig utanför psykakuten på Sunderby sjukhus. Då var det inte riktigt high life. Så att det har gått upp och ner, verkligen. Och det är klart att just nu tror jag vi känner oss starka och samlade, men det gör vi absolut inte alltid, herregud.
Du nämnde tidigare här att det var en lång period när ingen, utom ni nära, visste om det här. Offentligheten i Sverige var ju helt okunnig. Men New York Times publicerade hans namn. Hur var det när det här blev känt?
Ja, men det var ju som verkligen ett före och efter, som paradigmskifte i hela den här historien. Men vi kände då att det började liksom bli dags att det skulle komma ut. Det hade gått ett år och mer och vi hade funderat länge på när var det läge att gå ut med det, vad fanns det för risker, vad fanns det att vinna och så där. Så att, men till sist, som Ingrid sa, så var det så tydligt ändå att Johan ville att hans namn skulle komma ut, och vi kände väl också i familjen att vi var redo för det och att vi hade liksom inget att förlora på det. Så att det var väl, det blev ju en helt ny situation och ett annat liksom medietryck och allt det där, men på många sätt så var det en stor lättnad, tror jag, för oss, att inte behöva ha det här som en hemlighet, och att liksom kunna mötas av stöd och förståelse av andra har ju varit
Och hur har det där varit att balansera mellan, ska vi säga det här, inte säga det här, hur påverkar det honom? Hur har det varit att leva med den typen av frågor till sig själv?
Nu under intervjuer och sådär?
Ja, men framförallt kanske innan också ens hans namn var...
Nej, men då var det ju märkligt, och det som min pappa har beskrivit som liksom någon sorts dubbelliv. Verkligen jättemärkligt. Det blir en extra dimension. Alltså, vi går igenom något som för oss som familj är det värsta som har hänt oss. Och i vanliga fall i sådana situationer som människa, då vill man ju kanske ta stöd av sina nära. Och här var det tvärtom att vi inte riktigt kunde det. Så det var väldigt märkligt och svårt, absolut.
Men var det så att ni begränsade det här till, inte utanför den här kretsen? För det är klart, många vet att ni har en bror som jobbar i Bryssel.
Det förstod ju inte, just i och med att han också var bosatt i Bryssel, så det var väl inte så tydligt. Det var många av hans nära vänner som på lång tid inte visste, men som till sist hörde av sig till oss och bara, vad är det som har hänt? Nu måste ni svara. Jag har messat och mejlat på ett halvår. Vad har hänt? Så var det.
Fick ni råd från UD eller sådär att säg inte hans namn? Eller var det här ett beslut som ni hade och ägde hela tiden?
Det är ju absolut, har det varit vårt beslut, och de som har vetat om det har ju respekterat det. Så där. Men jag skulle säga att UD ger oss inga direkta råd, säger inte vad vi får eller inte får göra. Sen så försöker vi ju ha ett gott samarbete med dem, och vi står i tät kontakt med dem och har stort förtroende för dem. Så att vi försöker ju verkligen hela tiden göra saker i samråd med dem, men beslutet om vad vi går ut med, det är ju upp till oss. Men vi har ju aldrig varit i en sån här situation förut, så att väga just det här risker mot fördelar har varit jättesvårt, och det har funnits olika uppfattningar inom familjen, men till sist när det blev publik så tror jag att vi alla var införstådda att nu kommer det komma ut ändå. Vi var liksom förberedda och tyckte att det var dags.
Är det skönt att det är helt publikt? Att vi kan samla så här, hans namn sägs?
Ja, men det måste man alltså att kunna ha en sån här kväll där hans namn nämns och att vi samlas för att liksom uppmärksamma honom är ju fantastiskt och väldigt stärkande för oss allihop.
Men alltså framförallt är det för Johan själv som det här är stärkande, det här eventet ikväll, men även att det är publikt. Så är det, och det tror jag att Olivier och Bernard kan berätta mer om sen. Att känslan att sitta isolerad, tagen för någonting alltså, som du inte har gjort i ett annat land, och så vet du att ingen i mitt land vet ens detta. Mina nära vänner vet inte ens detta. Det måste ju vara otroligt demoraliserande.
Du pratade lite grann om när Johan kommer ut och förhoppningsvis så mycket som möjligt sig själv. Hur mycket tänker ni på det? Vad han har gått igenom och hur det kommer att ha präglat honom?
Jag tänker på det ganska mycket. Jag försöker att inte tänka på det för mycket för det är så... Vi vet ju inte när han kommer hem, även om jag är helt inställd på att han kommer komma hem, men vi vet inte när. Så att det är som en balansgång att vi vill ju såklart vara förberedda och kunna vara ett bra stöd för honom, men jag tänker också att det kommer medföras nya stora utmaningar och det tror jag också att vi kanske kommer få höra om senare ikväll om hur det kan vara.
Just nu så har ni ju då kontakt med någon slags intervall. Och det vi vet är att rättegången är avslutad. Åklagaren har yrkat på dödsstraff. Också svårt för i alla fall, tror jag, alla från sidan att ta in. Vad gör man med en sån information?
Ja, alltså vi har ju varit förberedda länge på att det kan bli en hård dom. Det är ju ett rättssystem som inte liksom är förutsägbart. Vi vet ju inte vad som kommer hända, men att höra sin brors namn nämnas i samma mening som dödsstraff, det är ju verkligen fruktansvärt och det tar vi på liksom största allvar och tycker jag är väldigt, väldigt allvarligt när han sitter på som helt felaktiga grunder.
Slutligen, vad ger er hopp och kraft att inte bara bryta ihop utan fortsätta kämpa och fortsätta hålla sig utanför psykakuten?
Nej, men det är väl ändå mänsklig gemenskap skulle jag säga, tycker jag. Och det är väl det man har lärt sig under den här resan, både inom familjen där det såklart har gått upp och ner, men där jag känner nu att vi ändå är starkare som familj. Och även då liksom the extended family som sitter här, de flesta då liksom alla Johans nära vänner som vi har kommit jättenära i familjen och som också så här helhjärtat har stöttat oss och liksom gör allt ni kan. Så det är väl det. Och det är alltid så att kanske om någon är nere så kanske någon annan som är lite starkare just då på något sätt.
Sen tror jag också som vi fick höra från Johans hälsning är hur hårt han jobbar för att verkligen inte kanske hitta mening med det här, men att ändå ta sig igenom det här på ett bra sätt och ta dag för dag och acceptera situationen som den är. Jag tänker om han kämpar med det, då måste vi också kämpa med det och också att vi vill ju vara i bra form för honom när han kommer hem. Så att det tycker jag också är någonting som stärker mig.
Tove och Ingrid, stort tack för att ni kom hit och delade med er av era tankar och känslor. Tack.
Och tack själva.
Vi bara passa på också att tacka på förhand alla som har kommit idag.
Förlåt. Vill du lägga till något?
Jag tänkte bara passa på, vi från hela familjen vill ju självklart tacka alla som kommer hit idag och vi vill också tacka Kulturhuset som har arrangerat detta ihop med oss och även de modiga männen som snart kommer gå upp här på scenen. Så jag vill bara passa på att säga det också. Ja,
tack.
För oss.
So we'll switch this conversation to English and I would like to welcome Olivier Vandecasteele, Phelan and Martin Schibbye. Please give them a warm welcome. Very warm welcome. I hope you can feel the warmth from the audience. You all share the same horrible experience of being incarcerated unrightfully for an amount of time which is almost impossible to comprehend. For you, Olivier, 456 days. Bernard 221 days, and Johan 438 days. You all read Johan's letter in English, as we heard it some minutes ago in Swedish. How did you react, Olivier?
Well, I can recognize some of the formulations that I could see Johan say. I also can fully understand the importance when you're in that situation that you want to provide appeasement and reassurement. But I think as much as important as the message is also what is not in the letter.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the things that would not be able to be put in a letter that comes out of that specific unit in which he is, which is his conditions of detention, what he's lacking, what he's demanding but not receiving, and most likely as well a part at least of his true feelings.
What do you say, Bernard?
I agree with Olivier. There's certain things in the letter I felt the same. You know, sort of once you've been through what we've been through, you're afraid of nothing, which he says, and hope. I'm not sure about the hope side. I'm a bit suspicious about that. I was very frustrated in prison. You know, so I said, I hope people are doing this. I hope they're doing this, but I couldn't say that. Couldn't say that on the phone. Couldn't say that in messages. It was just not possible. So I agree with Olivier. There's a lot of things not said, which I'm sure Johan wants to say, but he couldn't.
Was it anything that you recognized or could relate to in the letter, Martin?
Recognize this feeling that, I mean, they can imprison you, they can take your freedom, they could chain you, they could torture you, but they can't touch, I mean, the core, the right to determine who you are. And I felt that he had found a strategy where he really keeps that inner place sacred and untouchable for the authorities and for the prison. And that, I mean, that made me smile that he has a strategy to cope with what he can control and what he can't. And I really like the part where he took these mental walks, you know, going skiing or going through the streets of Gothenburg. And I remember that strategy. I mean, you could just lay down, close your eyes, and then you could walk for hours and try to remember, okay, what's behind this tree, what's behind that stone. And in that moment, you were totally free. And that was very comforting to hear.
We'll get back to strategies because I know this is very hard for you to talk about, and I know that you're committed to do what you can to support Johan. But I'd like to connect to the topic of hope, because that could be a tricky thing when you're incarcerated. You told me about that, Martin. Would you like to elaborate a little bit of how you dealt or didn't deal with hope?
In my situation, hope was the most dangerous word in a prison. Hope was dangerous in a way that it could destroy you. Because if you started hoping, well, maybe in a month I will get this positive information, or maybe in a week someone will tell me that something positive will happen, and you started to get your hopes up, and then you got disappointed. And that made you that could destroy you because you didn't have the mental power to get up from that disappointment in a way. And those kind of big feelings, I tried to avoid them and suppress them. And I used to see hope as a piece of charcoal in your hand. And you didn't want to suffocate it, but on the other hand, you didn't want to like blow on it, then it would burst up into flames and destroy you totally. So you tried to keep it glowing, but you knew it was something dangerous that you didn't want to play with. Thoughts of freedom, of hope, or all those words were really, really dangerous.
Is this something you can relate to? Did you have the same way of dealing with the feeling of hope?
I agree with Martin. I hope is too dangerous. I mean, the Iranians are great for building up your hopes. You're going to have a phone call next week. Yes, there'll be a phone call. And you ring down, well, where's the phone call? And yes, security's going to come back to you, and they don't come back to you. There's no phone call, and your hopes are dashed. You're going to get a consular visit. You're not going to get a consular visit. You promise things. They lie all the time. You know. I remember when about a week after being taken prisoner, I was told, "Oh, your family now know that you're in prison, and you'll be shortly handed over to the French authorities." And I was there for another 7 months. Hope is dangerous. It's just something that I agree, you just banish from your mind. You just most is just frustration.
Because from the outside, one would think that hope is the thing that keeps you alive, keeps you going. But you mean you try to suppress the feeling? Did you have the same? Were you thinking the same way?
Yes. Well, I think it's for me it was about not building expectations, because I think if you build expectations, then basically you're in for basically a potential disappointment. And I think this is again where I think it is important to remember ourselves tonight that I mean, it will soon be 2 years that Johan is there, and well, first of all, and unless I missed some information, I think there's still not a proper, sentence or formal reason why he's there. I recall very well when we met in April last year. At that time as well, to go back to what Bernard was just saying, he was already being told by his interrogators that he would soon get the sentence. And I think this is not this is done on purpose. I think we need to really have that in mind. This is not done by lack of follow-up from the Iranian authorities. This is done on purpose. This is done to break people. And again, this is where for me, it is very important to be here tonight to say that time is of essence, and that it is really important to do as much as we can all together to basically look for a solution as soon as possible, because the amount of pressure that this takes on an individual is, it is not a conducive environment to survive in. Yes, I think it is this constant building of expectation and the disappointments that come with it that are taking a toll on people.
You told me when we talked before this meeting that it's important that people understand the circumstances in prison, because this is not a normal or an ordinary prison, the Evin prison. Could you, if you manage, give us some sort of idea what this place is about?
Yes, so it's kind of how much you can go into the levels of hell, right? The different layers of hell. So Evin prison has already a very bad reputation worldwide, and for very good reasons. Because of the torture, because of a lot of the political activists, etc. Then within that prison, there's one particular block or unit, which is called Unit 209, where Johan is being still detained today, where I have spent quite a significant number of months as well. And I think it's important to realize that this is not the public ward of Evin. So you have no freedom whatsoever. You have indeed the only freedom, and indeed this is coming back to what Martin was saying. This is it's what I call the ultimate freedom, is what you where you put your mind, and that you can indeed go into your souvenirs, your memories, to cope with the situation. But beyond that, you have zero freedoms. In the public ward, for example, you may leave your room and potentially go to a courtyard, which is what worldwide most of the prisons at least offer. In Unit 209, this can't be. So you are meant to stay in your room as long as the people who supervise you decide so, and when you will be taken out is entirely depending on them. You will never be informed about what's the purpose of any movement. Any movement out of the cell is blindfolded, so that you lose a sense of geographic, it is about deprivation of senses. So you have no sense of time, because there's no window that you can look through. You have no sense of geography, because you can't leave your room without a blindfold on. And yes, they do. The whole system is built again, and I think this is very well thought. It's sadly well thought of, in the sense that they want to make you feel that way as well. That to kind of belittling you as much as they can. Johan at the moment has 3 times a week he's allowed to take some fresh air in a courtyard, which basically, if my information is correct, and it was the same for me, is about 3 times 20 minutes. So you have to imagine basically an hour of being a little bit outside of your room for the whole week, which again is beyond international conventions. And then I think most important for me, at least this, I knew in my case, I didn't bother not to have a mattress. I didn't bother to have, not good and mainly, very tasteless food. But what you miss the most is contact. And also the contacts with the exterior are monitored. They are totally irregular. They're based on the will and the play of your interrogators, who play with this, as Bernard was mentioning. Yes, and again, this is just first of all unacceptable. It's the consular rights that Johans currently have are definitely not what Iran has signed to as being party to the Vienna Convention on consular rights. This is way below. So there are also very strong legal basis that this situation is not acceptable. Maybe I'll stop there, but yeah.
Being isolated, as I understand you describing, is the worst. You miss the contact of people is the thing you miss the most. Is that the same thing you have experienced? What do you say, Bernard?
Yes, I mean, the first part of my imprisonment was isolation, no contact with anybody in a room, no 24-hour lighting, sleeping on the floor, handcuffs, blindfolds, exactly the same, but not for as long. But I was in Mashhad, which is 1,000 kilometers further east, and our block, the specialist block 6-1, which they called Satan's block, was also the block this is pretty rough, was where the Iranian prisoners who are going to be executed are brought the night before, and you would see their flip-flops outside their cell, and sometimes you'd hear them crying, and that was pretty rough. You can the next morning, then after prayer, they'd be executed. And if there was somebody important, all the phones would be cut, so the other prisoners couldn't telephone their families and let them know. The idea of living with the executions, and sort of since then I've discovered in Mashhad there were hundreds of people executed in terrible conditions. That was difficult. And coming back to the crashing your hopes, I mean, I was brought to a court and I was told I was going to get 3 years, but the judge said, we're going to ask for a pardon for you, and because of your health and your age. And 1 week later you go back and they dash your hopes. No, you're getting 6.5 years and there's no pardon. That's, their speciality is just dashing your hopes. So that's why, like Martin, don't have hope. You don't know what's going to happen.
Your experience, there's been several years since you stayed in this prison in Ethiopia. Is these interiors that you can relate to, or was it different in any way, would you say?
I mean, we had lunch before, and then we kind of compared the extremes. Because I mean, I was in a compound with 800 other people, and if you have isolation on one end and 800 on the other hand, I guess the best place would be somewhere in the middle. But I mean, the first month we were kept isolated and apart from each other, me and Johan, the photographer, and I can just, I mean, underscore what you said. That was really the worst part, when we were held in isolation. And I also remember the frustration that, I mean, why wasn't I, taught strategies for this at the School of Journalism? I mean, if the situation we face is like this, that we are being, shot and jailed and charged with made-up crimes, we need to start to share those strategies. And I remember, trying to think, okay, what have I read that could help me? And I remembered one book by Arthur Koestler, who wrote the book Night at Noon, and his main character, Rubashov, in that book. I remember in order to not freeze and not get cold in the cell, he runs in figure eights. Because if you run around and round, you will get dizzy. And even if you change direction, you will get dizzy. But running in figure eights, I mean, you could run for miles. And doing that and feeling, I mean, this is knowledge.
Did you do that?
Yeah. And this is, I mean, knowledge that we should have in a book, in a shelf. It should be part of the history of literature. It should not be something that you need to teach at schools of journalism. So that, I mean, it also made you think how unprepared you were for that situation. And I think it's becoming more and more common. I mean, how to survive in a cell, unfortunately.
Maybe this is a very stupid and strange question, but do you think you could have in any way been prepared for what you went through? What do you say, Bernard?
No, there's nothing comparable. I mean, maybe if I'd read a book about Iranian prisons, I would have, I'd watched Iranian cinema and seen prisons on the cinema, but nothing prepares you for this. I mean, as my husband said at one stage, he said, we are all familiar, it's not the nice word to say, we're familiar with death and accidents and people falling ill, but when you find somebody's kid is a hostage, nobody's prepared for that. We're not prepared for this situation where you have a state not respecting their own rules. Normally, foreign prisoners, I was told, are entitled to phone their families once a week. That was never respected. It's just crazy. This country getting away with murder, just saying that they're treating people so badly. No, there's no way you could prepare for this.
What do you say, Olivier?
No, I will not say anything more apart from saying that definitely, at least to me, it brought back the importance of having good memories, and as Martin was saying, the ability to go and fish for them in these difficult times. Again, I think in general, people don't necessarily have to be hostage taken to have difficult times, and I think it's just, for me, it's a key message I'm trying to share since I'm back, which is the importance of creating good memories between each other, because in the end it's not about not being connected with your phone or with the internet, etc. What you miss the most, again, it's contact and it's good memories with people.
I'd like to get back to the short period when you met Johan in prison. What did it mean for you, and what do you think it meant for him?
First of all, I want to mention, because I received a translation of the introductions, and I want to say that beyond the letter that was shared, in these 3 weeks approximately we spent together. I say approximately because honestly I don't know the number of days. At some point you start to lose count a bit. But basically at that time, and it was not monitored, it was just a talk between us. A year ago already, Johan wanted basically, he was aware that my case was public. His case at that time was not yet. And he had strongly and clearly asked me to basically also engage with his family and friends to support the mediatization of his case. So I want to clarify that beyond what can be potentially indeed monitored, of course, every conversation and phone call is being monitored, but this was a true and real desire of Johan. Now, why do we want that? I think it's first of all because there's an injustice, and you want to a certain degree the world to know. Also, you don't want a perpetrator to go, unnoticed with what they're doing. I think that, at least to me, this was very important. And then I think a reason that's probably as important, at least for me, and I believe also for Johan, is the fact that, when the case is public, it's also about the relief it can bring. Of course, the challenges too, I can understand that, but also the relief it can bring to the family and the friends. Because having to bear such a difficult situation in silence is even harder. So, yes.
Yeah, I would like you to talk about that too, but just the period when no, this is perfectly fine, Olivier, but the time you spent with Johan, if it was 3 weeks more or less, what did it mean for you, and what did it mean for him, do you think? And how could you support each other, small means or whatever mean?
Look, very basic things in the sense that, I believe I was lucky to meet him there because I came out of more than 400 days of solitary confinement. I had a very strong desire in talking, and I could finally find someone with whom I could relate and talk and find some level of confidence. Because again, within these 400 and plus days of solitary confinement, the only person I could talk to was the person who actually sometimes pretended to be my friend, but actually was the person accusing me of plenty of wrongdoing. So he was one of the very first faces and persons I met. So he meant a lot to me in that sense. Then, of course, it's also the fact that, both of us experienced some, the same city, like Brussels, so we could support each other a little bit in remembering memories from places we both know. And then, again, when we got separated, most likely it was because we annoyed someone by talking too much. He was then taken out and put in another room. I was actually, again, to just come back to the permanent lies we get, I was told by the guard that he was freed, right?
Did you know what had happened to him?
No, I realized he wasn't freed when I was freed, and I asked about Johan. So it's just to tell you the level of lies that we permanently face. So what I wanted to say is that for basically, in a similar situation, it could have been me still there and him here talking, or talking in Brussels. I had the feeling that him being a diplomat, he made a better choice at being freed before me, to be very honest. So for me, it was a surprise to understand that he was still being detained when I was freed. But yes, I would say within that very difficult environment, these 3 weeks we spent together, I think we supported each other quite a lot. We shared stories, we shared memories, all the things that can make you, can make the day pass, first of all, but can make it a little bit lighter.
Could that be, for example? How do you make a day pass under those circumstances? What do you do?
I think both of us had, and I think it's what I read quite a lot now in literature of detainees, of former detainees, routines are very important, at least for me. I think really they have saved me. in general, I'm not so much a routine person, but over there, I don't know why and I don't know how, but it came to me as an intuition that I had to have a routine, and so Johan was the same. We were definitely the most active people, I think, in the whole floor, because the other people who were living with us sometimes were complaining that we were moving too much in the room. But basically, yes, it's basically doing, I don't know, walks, and I mean, again, we're talking walks over, 3-4 meters. But you need to tire yourself to be able to have a better sleep. So, I was doing kilometers and kilometers of walks. He was a bit more into, kind of physical exercises, etc. But we were active, trying to be active, during what we considered the day, because we had not necessarily a clue of when was exactly the morning and when was the evening. But routines, definitely. And then we talked a lot about literature and books. And
did you also create routines to sort of find a way to?
Absolutely. I mean, our routines were very different, because I was in a cell with Iranian political prisoners and foreign drug smugglers and murderers. So it was a bit more complicated. Our big routine was cooking with the Iranian prisoners. We could buy some stuff in a little store, and we'd cook together and then go down to the kitchens. But what made me, everybody had sort of a scapegoat or escape, and my escape was humor. I tried to make jokes, make fun. I'm not sure about it, I assume it's the same in Tehran, but when you sign a document in prison, you use your fingerprint. And in each cell there's a little ink pad when you fill in the form and you write and I would do the ink, and then I'd rub the ink down my nose, much to the horror of the Iranian prisoners, saying you're going to get into trouble. And became my mark, and everybody knew I would do this. And it was the same. We would give back books when there was a consular visit. And with my French prisoner, Benjamin, one day we had an idea, we're going to give 20 books back to the ambassador today. And into each book we put a piece of paper saying, hello, goodbye, when are we getting out? So the guards, that when they would examine the books, they'd have to go through every book and take out all these pieces of paper. And it helped to keep me sane. Humor was important for me to do funny things, to try and think of something else. It's books again. I mean, I read in 7 months 48 books. They were my lifeline. Literature was fantastic. It saved me.
Do you have any specific routines?
Yeah, I mean, I really recognize also the importance of routines. I mean, sometimes it could just be divide the day hour by hour for the first days, and then eventually you could have a larger horizon and start to think about extending your routines, doing more things. But I mean, I used to think that the days shouldn't be wasted. You should try and do something with this day. And if you read something, or if you wrote something, or if you did some exercise, then it was a good day. So just try to take care of the days and do the best you could with them.
How long time did it take to adjust to a way of living when you don't know when this is going to end? Or do you ever adjust?
I think the human spirit, in a way, we are too adjustable in a scary way. I mean, quite quickly, it was like living in this well, and looking up, and you see this small circle, and that's the sky, and you get used to that life. Okay, this is my whole world now. This small cell or this small zone, and in a way that is good, because I guess it's a survival mechanism that we are very easy to adjust. But on the other hand, it's kind of scary how your perspectives change so quickly. I mean, eventually, even hearing people being tortured, I remember in the beginning you were shocked, but after a year, other prisoners would joke like, he screams in this funny way. And always when this guy is tortured, he has this funny way of screaming. And I remember one time when my wife came to visit the prison, I told her this funny story about the prisoner being tortured, screaming in this funny way. And she's just looked at me and like, who have you, become? This is not funny. This is someone who's being tortured. But it was, you change, you change quick.
You're nodding, Bernard. Did you also adjust in some similar
Yes,
way?
when you meet people in your cell, I mean, who are condemned to death, and they don't know when it's going to happen. I mean, I've never met somebody condemned to death. Taj, who's a political prisoner, was in my cell. We became very close, and he'd been condemned to death. He's been in the prison for 7 years. He's in his 40s, and the death sentence has been commuted. And since I got out, I've been through various in contact with his wife, and he's been condemned to death again. And that's a horrible situation. Every time the door opens, you're wondering, are they going to collect him, or are they going to collect me? Am I going to be interrogated again? What's going to happen to me? You live on a sort of knife edge. Every sound. The first time I heard somebody when I was interrogated, I was there just the time of the protests. And in the second centre I was brought to on the first few days, I was put in a room with 2 other Iranians who were protesters, and they spoke English, and they were taken out because we were starting to speak English. That night I could hear somebody in the cell next door being beaten by something like a stick or a truncheon. I just put my hands up to my ears to try and I keep out the noise. But the worst was the people crying in the death cells the night before they were executed. That noise will never leave me.
Let's get back to what you mentioned earlier about the importance of knowing that people know about you and your destiny. I guess for all of you at first, you must have been terrified. Does anyone know I'm here? Does anyone knows what's happening? Were that feelings that you felt too in the beginning?
Yes, well, definitely. Again, the night that I was taken, again, maybe I was lucky, but I was basically taken. There were people around me, so I was taken in the evening at the apartment I was staying, and there were people there, and I recall very well I shouted to them to call the embassy to notify them. So I believe that at least both my government and my family was notified quite quickly. But then, yes, indeed, and then you're basically swallowed into a black hole where basically you keep on asking for contact again. And to me, I believe I was allowed to do my first call. It was several months after, and it was... well, they didn't do anything to help me, that was clear, because they asked me to remember the phone. So I managed to call, basically. They provided with me the phone where I could remember the phone of my sister. And yeah, that's how the first contact came. And after that, it was always irregular. It was always... in particular, that build-up. I don't know if Johan is going through the same now, but in my case, it's always been that when they wanted something, either they've asked me to do confessions, which I've refused to do, first in writing, then in video. Then they wanted me to, agree on some lawyer's name that I had no clue, and which I was not stupid. I knew it would not be a person that would help me. So they asked me for some signature, which I've refused. And whenever I was I knew with the time, with the learning, that when I was refusing something and basically staying my ground, I would get what they call incomunicado, which is basically they cut you from everything. This happened several times during my detention, and this was mentioned in the introduction, the only way that I could break the incomunicado when they basically didn't allow any meetings anymore or any communication. The only way I could break it was a hunger strike.
Did you discuss this with Johan as a tool?
So again, you can blame me for that.
Oh.
But yes, it's again, no one. I really want to put that straight here. No one hurts himself for the pleasure of it. It's because we want to have contact. It's also because, again, when you're in a cell of 4, and the other which was my case, and the other detainees get, a weekly call, and you're just seeing week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5. And, I talking about routines, I was bothering them as soon as I got the pen and paper, which took a few months. I bothered them with every Saturday. I was spending a few hours to write letters. I knew they were useless, but I was putting in my requests, and I told that as well to Johan. I said, like, every Saturday, just write that you want to contact with your family, that you want to meet with your embassy, etc. He was telling me they won't give it to me, and I said, yes, but put it in their face that they're not giving it to you.
It takes an enormous strength in those circumstances. Keep trying, keep pushing.
Well, first of all, it's a way to spend time. But the second, it's also, when everything is arbitrary, when nearly all your power, apart from your mind, they take away from you. So basically, I believe you resort to weird mechanisms, maybe, but still there are mechanisms where you try to regain some kind of power. And at least I knew that, yes, for 1 year I was in a basement. I still don't know where this was. It's somewhere out of Evin, but it was in a basement. And basically, again, the time was just passing there. If I wasn't going on hunger strike, they would just, they was just shifting food, and that's it. Nothing was happening. So the only thing where I saw that the guards were starting to freak out was when we were crossing the 1 week of me refusing any food. Then they started to ask me to engage a bit more with me, knowing what was going on. I told them, like, very well why I'm refusing to eat. It's because I'm meant to be able to contact people outside.
You relate to this kind of struggle to have a contact, or?
Yeah, it was the same because did you have those forms to fill in, those official forms? We had a form which we had to pay for, and I used to annoy the Iranians. I would write the form. Iranian friends would help me to put the object in the destination, the object in the subject. Then I'd write in English. I haven't been able to speak to my family for 3 weeks. This is not to say what should be allowed, and send off the form. So it was to annoy them. But it just, what I found was very difficult was the humiliation of being, because we were in a big prison, and when you were taken to court, you were in the prison uniform, the blue striped uniform, and in shackles and handcuffs, and you're taken to the courts, and you're taken in the minibus with other prisoners, and you're attached to another prisoner. And I remember the first time going to court, and the minibus pulls up in front, and we're taken down to snow on the ground, and I'm in flip-flops. And you go into the prison, you see the guard taking the bullets out of his gun, which has been with you. And you then go up 3 flights of stairs with shackles on your legs, and they cut your ankles. And everybody looking at you because you're the only European. And when the judge, because I was exactly the same as Olivier, because they're always trying to ask you to sign something, to write something, and I would say to them, well, would you sign something in Irish or in French? And they sort of look at me, and I'd cross my arms and wouldn't sign anything, and they'd bring in a guard to try and persuade me to sign. I said I wouldn't sign. And then when I left, the first time I met the judge, as I walked out the room, his translator said, you'll die in prison. That was a big shock. I sort of said to myself, how long am I going to be here for? Because, I mean, the difference in prison in Iran for ordinary prisoners or for people like us, when you're in prison in Europe or a normal country, you get a 10-year sentence. You know when you're going to get out. We never don't know when we're going to get out. You're going to get condemned for 3 years, 6 years, but that's total rubbish. It's horrible. You don't know when this nightmare is going to end.
This situation being so unpredictable, do you think that in a way gives you the strength to fight? It doesn't matter. So
Absolutely.
I could just as well protest in any way possible.
I have nothing to lose. It can't get any worse. Okay, they're going to cut at phone calls, they're going to use phone calls. Okay, but when I was frustrated, I was trying to get, I didn't know what, at the beginning I didn't know what was going on in Europe, but gradually, because there were political prisoners, the Iranian prisoners could ring their families as often as they liked during the breaks, and their families were watching opposition television, so they would give me the news. The first time I heard there was a protest outside the Iranian embassy in Dublin, was a political prisoner said, "Oh, we saw your dad outside the embassy." I said, "What are you talking about?" My wife rang me and she said there was a thing. So the news was getting faster to me. The consular phone calls weren't telling me that.
So it was broadcast on television in the prison?
No, the families outside the prison would watch opposition television.
Oh.
When they would telephone their husband in the prison, they'd say, "Oh, we saw Bernard's sister on television crying."
So that's the way you got to know it?
Absolutely. So that's how I knew something was happening.
And do you remember that feeling?
Oh, fantastic. I was so happy. When I heard there was a protest outside the Iranian embassy in Dublin, I said, "Wow, well done, Caroline."
Let's talk a little bit about what it means when you know that people are struggling for your cause. When you realized that, you and your colleague, what did it mean for you in your daily life in the prison in Ethiopia?
It was like paracetamol to the mind. I remember we encouraged people to send us letters, and we didn't know what to expect. But a couple of weeks later, we were called up to the censor in the prison, and he was very angry because suddenly he had a lot of work, and he had received these, boxes and sacks with letters and postcards, and he spread them out over his desk, and he was furious, like, "What is this?" And he said, "Well, you have the right to receive letters, but I'm the censor, and I have censored them all, so they will all be burned." But it didn't matter just to see, these postcards with, Swedish landscapes and things and greetings. Just seeing them there on his desk was, comforting in a way, because you felt that, we are not forgotten. All the things that we went to investigate are being discussed in Sweden: human rights, the situation in Ethiopia, the situation in Ethiopian prisons, and that made you feel that, okay, I could, play my part and stay healthy in the prison, and as long as these issues are being discussed back in Sweden. So it meant it was more important than bread and water to really feel that support. And it didn't have to be. Sometimes talking to friends after my release, they said, "Oh, I couldn't do much. I just wrote you a letter," or, "I couldn't set you free." But that's not what you ask for as a prisoner. It's not, freedom is not really on the agenda. We don't expect anyone to arrange our freedom. Just doing something very, very small, and it could even be things that didn't reach us but reached our family, so that they felt that, well, we are struggling with our daily lives, but we also do it with a sense that there is a solidarity for our case and for our situation. It's just as important for them, I think, to take a stand and to write letters, even though they are censored and you never receive them.
If I can add, it's also that, okay, so let's say, I think these are situations where you feel this injustice is very, like, let's say the strength or the might is very much on the side of the perpetrator. But when you have a little bit of mobilization, at least for me, it's when you feel a little bit that this balance tilts a little bit finally in your favor. Because of course, as Martin was saying, it's not the letters, or it's not the, the fact that you have 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people mobilizing that will necessarily bring the solution. But it's the fact that you feel, first of all, again, you feel that your pain is not unnoticed, then you know there are people around your loved ones. And then actually, this is another, because of what Bernard was mentioning, I recall very well one moment where I was called back into the office of a quite famous judge in Iran, Mr. Salavati, who is also called the hanging judge for his reputation. And I recall they were sermoning me and saying, you have to tell your family to stop the mobilization. You have to. And they were saying, they were pretending that this was not creating a conducive environment for discussions. And I just smirked and I said, no, I will not take that phone call. I'm very sorry. You know, and this is the time where you feel that, yes, the balance, let's say the injustice is a little bit, of course it didn't change, you know, the whole story, but you feel that you have a bit of power in saying like, look, you're annoyed by this. Well, I think my family and myself have been sufficiently annoyed for quite a long time.
Yeah.
So you know,
Now it's not your
I'm
turn.
very happy that you're pissed. and you know, you're not gonna get away with it, you know, in silence and unnoticed. I'm sorry. And I came back to myself. Of course, I was pissed that I had not had a call. But I was feeling very good at that time because I felt that it bothered them.
From the moment you realized that there was protest for your sake through the prisoners, that's quite an absurd way of getting to know that. What did it do for you and how did it support you?
It made my earlier frustrations, because I didn't know what was happening back in Europe, and obviously nobody was going to tell me on the phone what was happening, and the diplomats weren't telling me either. You know, saying, you know, we're working on it.
Is that because they couldn't, or could that deteriorate things?
No,
or?
because the telephone conversations were monitored, etc.,
Yes.
so they wouldn't give me that sort of information. But what really boosted, I mean, we're just talking about letters and messages. I mean, I got no letters, practically no letters when I was in prison. It was all read out to me over the phone by the diplomats back in Tehran. And I got a message from somebody said, "Oh, there's Philippe. There's a message for you." And I said, "I don't know any Philippe." And it turned out it was my electrician. I couldn't believe it. And it's just so fantastic. But the other thing that really was very important, and which did a lot of good, I think, also with the prison, was the Irish president, Michael D. Higgins, wrote to my dad a very touching letter which the Irish diplomat read over the phone to me, and brought tears to my eyes, because he used to say that every night he would pray with his wife for Bernard's release. And I said to Justin, the diplomat in Tehran, I said, "Can you get me that letter in Persian and get it to the prison? Because I'd like the prison authorities to read that." And I remember Justin, on one of his visits, he brought the letter, the photocopy of the original plus the Persian translation. And the other prisoners couldn't believe their eyes. Even Benjamin, the French prisoner, he said, "Wow, that's good." And that, I think, helped a lot, because the Iranians, in a certain respect, have a certain respect for old people. My father's 98 now, and the fact that the president was writing to my father, comforting me. I've been many times to Iran. I know Iranians, and I knew this would work, and it did work.
Let's talk a little bit about the situation of the relatives and the family. As Ingrid and Tove described earlier, and you know that, of course, it's a tremendous pressure, the uncertainty, the feeling of being helpless, and the sheer horror, of course. How did your relatives cope with this? Did they have any support, or was it just beneath friends and family? And did you understand at that time what they were going through?
No, I mean, I imagine, you know, when you take a hostage, you're not taking just me or Olivier or Martin a hostage. You're taking my husband Roland hostage, you're taking my sister Karen hostage, you're taking my dad a hostage. They're all hostages. We're all familiar with, dealing with other types of crisis, but hostages. And of course, you don't know what they're going through. You're sort of, originally I thought they said there was no news for me. I said they must think I had a car accident. They don't know what's happened. And I was terrified, about their worry. What were they going to think? Where were they going to start? Where do you start? Where do you pick up the phone? Who do you ring when you discover your husband or your brother is disappeared? It's a very, very difficult situation. But once you discover that something's happening back in Europe and people are talking about you, and my family were very good in setting up support groups. There were a very good Hostage International organization which found a psychiatrist for my sister, a psychiatrist for my husband, specialists in this sort of situation. And there were lots of people around helping. And they were right from the very beginning. I discovered when I came out, there was a committee working, putting pressure on the French ministry, putting pressure on the Irish ministry. I discovered an anecdote. I think once a week or once every 10 days, all my friends would send an email to the French ambassador in Tehran, and he would end up with thousands of emails in his inbox. And the Department of Foreign Affairs in Paris said, "Can you stop them doing that?" No. And that when I discovered that afterwards, I was so happy. You just can't. You can't stop. You have to keep going, shouting out loud.
What did you discover afterwards? What your friends and relatives went through during your time as incarcerated?
So, on purpose, I have not looked a lot at 15 months that we missed each other. So actually, facts come in a bit by bit through more conversations. So I've kind of taken the decision once I landed not to start spending hours looking at digital material or videos from the past, but rather to discover things bit by bit. And I'm still actually discovering every month new things of what people have tried to do. And I like the fact that it comes, bit by bit. But there's been so many things, and again, that's where I think for me a key message would also be, no one I think here in the audience has necessarily the solution to this problem, right? But basically, it's a problem between two countries, Iran and Sweden in this case, where basically, as Bernard was mentioning, it's not just an individual; it's a whole family and friends who are all taken hostage by the situation. So I think all of us can do something, which is it can be an SMS, a word, a letter, attending a vigil, as some are planned in the coming weeks in different cities, including Stockholm in April. For me, these all contribute. I think when you're confronted with something that doesn't seem to have sense, we need to get together. I think it's a very basic human reaction to facing adversity. So I would say anything is meaningful, including to put indeed pressure on the actors who need to find a solution, because the longer this takes, the heavier the toll it will be on Johans, mental health, but of course also the close ones. And one thing that, to come back to the issue of the family, I think the first weeks we were all kind of I would say nearly high, like we were so, I think, happy and liberated that we didn't see the knock coming, and it came, I think, nearly a month after everyone got sick. I mean, with physical pain, etc. And I think it was because there was so much everyone had stored so much anxiety for such a long period of time. We first wanted to live the moment of reunion, but then after, just everyone broke. And it took months for us in our different relationships to actually re-equalize a bit. Because they have changed, I have changed. Everyone has changed through what happened. I mean, this is also something I think important for close ones to know. People change from these kind of incidents. It can be for the good, it can be for the worse. I don't know. But basically, these type of abnormal situations take a toll on people.
It has been a while, but then in relation to all the time you spent in prison, a very short time that you've been free, can you say today what this has done to you, or how it has changed you, or is it yet to be discovered in a way?
I shouldn't have launched that topic, sorry. Well, I think I'm definitely still recovering. I'm still learning at how it has affected me. I think there are a lot of things, in particular, for example, talking about my close ones, my family, my friends, the people I love. It's still very sensitive to me. Much more than before, definitely. And then yes, when it can be I don't know, a sentence in a song. It can be something I'm reading here and there. Bernard was mentioning this over lunch, that he has the same. It's just you can go from a smile to tears in a very short time.
You never know what's going to set you off, or there's going to be a picture on the television or a song. You just break down in tears and you can't stop. But I mean, obviously I've changed and my family's changed, everybody's changed. We're never going to be the same. It's not possible. But I promised myself, or I've promised myself to enjoy life as much as possible since I've come out. Never to say, or if possible, never to say no for an opportunity to do something. Don't put off tomorrow because you might never know what's going to happen. Those things you promised yourselves. When I was the first week in solitary confinement, I said, I'm going to talk about this when I get out. I'm going to write a book and I'm going to get a dog. And I'm writing a book and I got a dog, a Labrador, Ulysses. And I'm happy. We laugh more as a couple than before. We enjoy life. We take more pleasure out of life. We realize that we've gone through hell. Now we have to do everything to make life good, to enjoy his life. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. I can't say anything else. It's just life has just totally changed. It's just not the same.
You were incarcerated, working as a journalist, and you ended up in Ethiopia, and that's a different country compared to Iran. And there's many years has passed. But could you say now, looking back, in what way your experience has changed you, if it has, and in what way?
I mean, when I'm listening to Olivier and Bernard, I really recognize myself during the first year after being released, because that year was, hellish. That year was worse almost than being in jail, because you had this survivor's guilt in a way. All the local journalists were still there. You had the promise that you gave them to, tell the world what you had seen, and you had to keep that promise and make it count. But I also remember when the book was finished and published, that was really the day that I felt free for the first time. I had written myself free. So I think that is, it's a process. And I'm thinking when when the time for Johan is to be released, I mean, he will really have you to help him during that first year. I mean, with that said, I also think that the family are really the ones paying the highest price. I mean, yes, we pay a price, but having the freedom to always write another email, always make another phone call, always arrange another activity. And also having the imagination, you know, what is Johan going through now at this hour? Johan knows what's happening at this very minute, at this very second, but we don't. And I think that the imagination is always worse than the reality in a way, and that makes it so stressful for the family and for the outsider. But I think they also can play a crucial role. I mean, beyond diplomacy and beyond journalism, as you said, the letter from your father. I mean, family means something in Iran, in Ethiopia, that it doesn't really mean in Sweden, and I think that could be used in a smart way, so that people understand, you know, who Johan is, who his family is, where he's coming from, what was his dreams, and so on. So, yeah, and so family has a really crucial role to play, but it's a hard price to pay. I mean, comparing the countries, it's super difficult in a way. Of course, Ethiopia wanted to be part of the international community. They wanted to have the respect. The international criticism hurt them, and they were annoyed by it. And I'm glad to hear that is the case with Iran as well. It shows that there is something to work with. And in our case, I mean, they found a solution where Ethiopia could solve the problem without losing its face, by sentencing us very, very hard to 11 years and then giving us pardon. So in a way, they could show that the legal system was robust. They didn't, you know, they could sentence foreign nationals for terrorist crimes, and then they could also show that they were, you know, great enough to pardon us eventually. So they found a solution where kind of both states solved their problems.
A final question. I don't know if the same in your countries, but in Sweden we heard the expression of silence diplomacy or silent diplomacy. And I think many people interpret that, oh, don't make too much noise, don't stir the process, maybe taking part. And I understand that for the relatives it's maybe what they hear or maybe what they think they hear. For you, is it difficult questions like make all the noise you can, and don't worry about the possible consequences?
Absolutely. I mean, my family straight away, my husband was attacking almost the French Department of Foreign Affairs, saying, "What are you doing today? What have you done? What have you done yesterday?" You need to make noise. You need to get out there, and the silent diplomacy is, you know, every person I've talked to who's been in prison. I talked to Nazim Ratcliffe, who was the English Iranian, and I talked to her husband Richard and her after coming back, and she said exactly the same. You can't. The silent diplomacy doesn't get anywhere.
What do you think, Olivier?
I was just writing, the silent cases are usually longer there. I believe so. Again, I can understand that in the first months you might want to cross-check what has happened. You might want to understand, you know, if there's not been, I don't know, a misunderstanding, you know, or if what exactly, for example, is Johan accused of? What? So I think it's fair to give the time in the initial months to cross-check identity, purpose, you know, these kind of facts. But I think with the time grows the pain, both for the person who's you know, arbitrarily detained, as well as for his family. And I would say reduces also the justification of keeping this silent. And when we understand that basically the reason for Johan to be there, I think is clearer now, but also that what they're accusing him of seems to keep on growing in terms of size. I think this is an indication that yes, that maybe more needs to be done in terms of conversations again between the parties that can find a solution to that. And yes, I think after a certain point in time, after maybe, I don't know, a few months of being silent, I think it's important to let also that voice out again, because number one, Johan needs to know he's not forgotten. And I think different cases, but there are always ways that information reaches the person, even though he might not have access to information. It might take days or weeks, but the information that something is being done will reach him, and it will be something that will suit him a bit in his pain. Number two is the family shouldn't be alone in this. And number three is that this type of inadequate, inappropriate, unacceptable behavior should be put in the public. At least that's, for me, these are the three reasons that where I don't really see in the long run what is the argument for silent diplomacy.
So go out there and make noise and keep on doing noise, making noise. On behalf of the whole audience, I want to thank you so much for being here tonight, sharing your, in many ways, awful memories, but also giving us hope. So thank you so much. And afterwards, you can talk with Johan's friends and family. They'll be around and have name tags in case you need that. I don't think so. It feels like we're a big family. Thank you so much for discussing with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.